The world stage is constantly shifting, with countless events unfolding across the globe every single day. From economic tremors and political realignments to social movements and environmental concerns, staying informed is more crucial than ever. Today, we're diving deep into a fascinating aspect of recent American political history, exploring the intense reactions and divisions sparked by one particularly polarizing figure. We'll examine specific regions and uncover the reasons behind their strong stances, digging into data, historical context, and the sentiments that shaped their political landscapes. Stick with us as we unpack this complex narrative, and remember, we'll be drawing conclusions at the end of this analysis. Before we delve into the heart of the matter, if you find value in understanding the intricate dynamics of politics and economics, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting that like button. Your support is incredibly important for helping us continue to bring you in-depth content like this. Also, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We love hearing from our diverse audience around the world. Imagine a political landscape so divided that entire states seem to develop an almost visceral reaction to a single political figure. Do you believe every corner of America embraces Donald Trump? Perhaps reconsider that thought. What if certain states exhibit what could only be described as a profound aversion to him? We're talking about areas where his public appearances are met with boos, where his very name ignites demonstrations, and where his policies are symbolically rejected, sometimes even burned in effigy. This isn't just political disagreement. It's a level of passionate opposition that demands closer examination. Why do millions of Americans harbor such intense feelings, bordering on disdain, for him? Is the root cause found in issues of race, a struggle for power, perceptions of dishonesty, or is there something even more fundamental at play? This intense sentiment isn't confined to expected liberal bastions. It surfaces in unexpected battlegrounds as well. These states didn't merely cast their votes for the opposing party. Their rejection felt deeply personal, a statement extending beyond the ballot box. You might be genuinely surprised by the lengths some communities have gone to signal their repudiation of him and his political brand. Make sure you watch this video until the very end, as we'll be consolidating these observations and presenting some key conclusions based on the patterns we uncover across these 10 distinct states. Let's begin our exploration with the 10th state on our list, California. Known globally as the land where aspirations are pursued and fortunes are made, it appears this welcome doesn't fully extend to Donald Trump. Envision a place where nearly every action he took, every policy he proposed, was greeted not with applause, but with resounding jeers, widespread protests, and persistent calls for impeachment. This wasn't merely passive disagreement. California manifested an active, forceful rejection. It's a state that seemed determined not just to oppose him, but to actively push him and his political ideology away. California stands as a beacon of progressive ideals, and it should come as no surprise that it also houses some of the most vocal and organized resistance to his leadership. The state's identity is deeply intertwined with forward-thinking policies and a diverse population, creating a stark contrast with Trump's platform. This opposition wasn't limited to political elites. It resonated deeply within the cultural fabric of the state. From the technological powerhouses of Silicon Valley, whose leaders often clashed with Trump's administration on issues like immigration and trade, to the outspoken celebrities of Hollywood who used their platforms to voice dissent, the sentiment was widespread. Trump simply hasn't found a warm reception in the Golden State. The divide between California's core values, emphasizing environmental protection, multiculturalism, and social liberalism, and Trump's presidency, is vast and undeniable. You would be genuinely taken aback by the sheer depth of this chasm. While one might anticipate some level of political division in any large state, California's stance felt remarkably unified in its rejection. It's not merely about being a blue state. The opposition runs deeper, touching upon fundamental principles and cultural identity. The state hasn't supported a Republican presidential candidate since 1988, a streak solidified by demographic shifts and evolving political alignments. Trump's specific policies concerning immigration, particularly relevant in a state with a large immigrant population and proximity to the Mexican border, climate change, a critical issue for a state facing wildfires and drought, and healthcare, where California has often pursued more expansive coverage than federal mandates, only served to deepen this divide. The state legislature actively passed laws to counteract Trump's policies, particularly on environmental regulations and immigration enforcement, signaling a clear defiance against his administration. The cultural clash was palpable, with California representing in many ways the antithesis of the political movement Trump championed. They are unequivocally all in on rejecting him. Moving eastward, we arrive at number 9, New York. Consider the irony. The state where Donald Trump constructed his real estate empire, where his name adorns skyscrapers, and where his public persona was forged, is also a state where his political ambitions faced intense repudiation. Imagine launching a national political career only to have the people from your home state consistently turn their backs on you. New York City, the very metropolis where his legacy began, became a battleground the moment he entered the political arena. The relationship wasn't just strained. It evolved into a full-blown conflict between the man and the city he once epitomized. His policies and rhetoric seemed fundamentally at odds with the cosmopolitan, diverse, and largely liberal values of the city and much of the state. This rejection wasn't subtle. It manifested in street protests, legal challenges, and vocal opposition from state and city officials. From the towering financial centers of Manhattan to the diverse neighborhoods of Brooklyn and Queens, Trump's message often failed to resonate. His rhetoric, particularly regarding immigration and urban issues, clashed sharply with the lived experiences and political leanings of many New Yorkers. But here lies a fascinating twist. One might assume that the state that birthed his career would, at some level, rally behind its native son. Yet the opposite proved true. New York has remained steadfast in its rejection of his political platform. In fact, it stands as one of the most overwhelmingly Democratic states in the entire nation. With every controversial statement, tweet, or policy decision, his image in New York seemed to erode further. The state consistently delivered massive margins for his Democratic opponents in both the 2016 and 2020 presidential elections. Trump's attacks on New York's sanctuary city policies, which aimed to limit cooperation with federal immigration enforcement, were particularly contentious, drawing sharp rebukes from local leaders and further alienating a significant portion of the electorate. It's hardly surprising, then, that he faced audible boos and protests, even at events held within his home state, a stark indicator of the disconnect between the former president and the place where he first made his name. The state's political landscape is dominated by Democrats, and the cultural fabric of New York City, in particular, proved resistant to his brand of politics. Next on our list, at number 8, is Massachusetts. What occurs when a state renowned for its progressive principles, intellectual heritage, and historical significance squarely rejects the individual leading the nation? Massachusetts, the cradle of the American Revolution and home to some of the world's most prestigious universities, presents a compelling case study in this political divide. You are about to discover the depth of this rejection. The state has made its position exceptionally clear. Donald Trump is not welcome here. His brand of politics finds little fertile ground in the Bay State. You might be astonished by the intensity with which Massachusetts has pushed back against his administration and its policies. The state has historically been a stronghold of Democratic power, and this tradition only strengthened during the Trump era. Its voters overwhelmingly favored Joe Biden in the 2020 election, with Biden securing nearly 2/3 of the vote, leaving Trump with just over 32%. The electoral numbers were not just decisive, they were staggering, reflecting a profound ideological gulf. In fact, Massachusetts consistently ranks among the most liberal states in the country. The majority of its electorate supports policies that directly conflict with Trump's agenda. Issues like universal health care, environmental protection, gun control, and LGBTQ+ rights are deeply ingrained in the state's political identity. Trump's attempts to dismantle the Affordable Care Act, his withdrawal from the Paris Agreement on climate change, and his conservative judicial appointments were met with fierce opposition from Massachusetts politicians and residents alike. But here's the crucial point. Despite Trump's background as a businessman, Massachusetts, a hub of innovation, education, and research, home to institutions like Harvard and MIT, could not find common ground with him. You might wonder how a state that produced these bastions of intellect and gave the world countless scientific and educational advancements feels about Trump's frequent attacks on science, expertise, and educational institutions. Let's just say the appreciation is minimal. They perceive such attacks as undermining the very foundations upon which the state's success is built. From the outset, Trump's policies on health care, his stance on climate change, and his persistent undermining of scientific expertise placed him at odds with Massachusetts' core values. This wasn't just a disagreement among the coastal elites or university professors. Regular citizens in towns across the state felt the same way. Massachusetts voters didn't merely reject Trump's policies. They fundamentally repudiated his divisive rhetoric and his approach to governance. From tax cuts benefiting the wealthy to the rollback of environmental safeguards, the actions of his administration were viewed with alarm and spurred significant resistance. The state's residents were not just unhappy, many were furious. Now, let's consider a state that, while smaller, packs a significant political punch. Number 7. Vermont. How does a state that fiercely prides itself on independence, progressive ideals, and a strong sense of community react to a president whose style and substance seem antithetical to everything it stands for? Vermont, known for its picturesque landscapes and famously independent political streak, provides a unique perspective on the anti-Trump sentiment. The Green Mountain State has been at the vanguard of resistance against Donald Trump, making its disdain abundantly clear. You would be truly surprised to learn that even though Vermont is relatively small in population, its political voice carries considerable weight, and that voice has been consistently critical of Trump. The state, with its population just under 700,000, has experienced a particularly turbulent relationship with Trump's presidency, and the electoral results speak volumes about this dynamic. Bernie Sanders, the state's most prominent senator and a national figurehead for progressive politics, became one of the most visible faces of the opposition to Trump. His supporters, known for their passionate engagement, have been exceptionally vocal in their resistance. Sanders' platform, emphasizing social safety nets, environmental action, and campaign finance reform, represents a stark contrast to Trump's policies. However, the opposition in Vermont extends far beyond just Sanders and his base. The state has unequivocally signaled its disapproval through consistent voting patterns and prevailing public sentiment. In the 2020 election, Vermont delivered an overwhelming victory for Joe Biden, giving him approximately 66% of the vote, one of the largest margins in the country. Similarly, in 2016, Vermont strongly favored Hillary Clinton. The state's residents seem to find little common ground with Trump's approach. You might wonder why a state often perceived as rural, with a significant farming community, would reject Trump so decisively. But here's the revealing part. Vermont isn't just a standard blue state. It's a place with deeply rooted principles. Its rejection of Trump stems from its commitment to progressive values, particularly social justice, universal healthcare access, and robust environmental protection. Trump's positions on these critical issues simply did not align with the priorities of Vermonters. When it came to his stance on climate change, his efforts to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, or even his controversial rhetoric surrounding immigration, the state demonstrated minimal tolerance. But here's a subtle twist. Vermont cherishes its reputation for independence and critical thinking. Its residents aren't simply following a party line. They value leaders who reflect their core principles. Vermonters desire a president who shares their commitment to community, fairness, and environmental stewardship. And for them, Trump simply wasn't the right person for the job. The state's progressive inclination means that any political approach resembling Trump's divisive style meets with swift and broad rejection. Trump didn't just lose the electoral votes in Vermont in 2020. He arguably lost the heart and soul of the Green Mountain State. Let's shift our focus westward again to number 6, Illinois. What happens when you merge a vast, diverse population, a powerful democratic political machine centered in a major metropolis, and a comprehensive rejection of Donald Trump's policies? The answer is Illinois. You would be genuinely shocked to discover just how resolutely this Midwestern state stands against him. From the dynamic, bustling streets of Chicago to the quieter, agricultural corners of the state, Trump's presidency encountered constant and significant pushback. And interestingly, the state's political landscape hasn't shifted significantly in his favor since. Illinois remains a reliable Democratic stronghold in presidential elections. In the 2020 election, the state overwhelmingly backed Joe Biden, granting him a margin of victory exceeding 17 percentage points. This result made it unequivocally clear that Trump's policies and political style did not resonate with the majority of Illinois voters. The state's urban centers, particularly Chicago and its surrounding suburbs, are home to a diverse mix of blue-collar workers, college students, professionals, and various ethnic communities. This demographic mix largely gravitated towards opposition to Trump's stances on immigration, his handling of the economy, despite claims of success many felt left behind, and his environmental policies. However, the rejection of Trump wasn't confined solely to the cities. Even in some of the more traditionally conservative rural areas, support for Trump, while present, faced headwinds as people began to distance themselves as his term progressed. His rhetoric and actions pushed the state further towards the left politically. Even many moderate Republicans within Illinois found themselves distancing their own platforms from his direct influence, recognizing the challenging political climate he created within the state. What's perhaps even more striking is Illinois' strong union presence. The state is home to some of the nation's most influential labor unions. Trump's often antagonistic approach towards organized labor, coupled with his administration's attempts to weaken union protections and workers' rights, naturally generated significant friction. For the state's workers, many employed in industries Trump pledged to revitalize, like manufacturing, his promises often felt hollow. They felt betrayed when policies didn't translate into the widespread job growth initially anticipated. For them, Trump's declarations about bringing back manufacturing jobs didn't align with their reality. But the core of the issue runs deeper. Chicago, Illinois' largest city, is frequently cited as an epicenter of anti-Trump sentiment. From large-scale protests to political rallies opposing his administration, the city's progressive atmosphere positioned it as a symbol of resistance. Trump's policies targeting cities, particularly concerning crime and immigration enforcement, were met with strong opposition from Chicago's leadership and residents. It became evident that Illinois would not tolerate his divisive brand of leadership. Finding ardent Trump supporters in many parts of Illinois is a challenge, and it would be difficult to identify any significant region where his policies weren't met with deep-seated opposition. Illinois' rejection of Trump wasn't merely political. For many, it felt personal, a reaction against a perceived attack on their values and way of life. They weren't just upset, they were outraged. Our fifth state takes us back to the Pacific Northwest, Oregon. Imagine a state celebrated for its stunning natural beauty, its fiercely independent and progressive political culture, and its unwavering commitment to environmental sustainability. Now, picture a president whose policies seem to clash with nearly every core value that state holds dear. That sets the stage for Oregon. You'd be truly amazed at how staunchly this state repudiated Donald Trump. With its expansive forests, forward-thinking cities like Portland and Eugene, and deep-seated environmental values, Oregon has consistently been a vocal critic and opponent of his administration from the very beginning. Trump's disregard for climate change science and his administration's policies affecting public lands sparked intense and widespread resistance here. The state's commitment to environmentalism is not just policy, it's part of its identity. Furthermore, Oregon is home to a burgeoning urban population that overwhelmingly supports progressive policies. From Portland to Eugene, the state's cities are populated by individuals who reject Trump's views on critical issues such as health care, immigration, and social justice. In fact, in the 2020 election, Oregon voted decisively for Joe Biden, giving him a margin of victory of about 16 percentage points, further cementing its stance against Trump. You might be surprised to learn that Oregon was at the heart of some of the most significant and prolonged protests against Trump's handling of racial justice issues. When Trump deployed federal agents to Portland in the summer of 2020, ostensibly to quell protests, but seen by many as an overreach of federal power, it only galvanized opposition and ignited further demonstrations. This confrontation between federal forces and local protesters became a national flashpoint, symbolizing the deep divisions of the era. The city's residents, along with people across the state, didn't just disagree with Trump, they actively opposed his presence and influence, viewing his actions as fundamentally contrary to their values. But here's an important nuance. Oregon's resistance wasn't solely an urban phenomenon. While cities were hubs of protest, the political shift against Trump was noticeable even in smaller, more rural communities. Communities that might have once been divided began to see a growing wave of anti-Trump sentiment as his policies on trade, environmental regulations, and federal land management came into sharper focus. The state's unique blend of environmental consciousness, progressive politics, and independent spirit created a potent combination of opposition. Oregonians, known for valuing individuality and community, saw Trump's leadership style as divisive and contrary to their ethos. It's not merely about adhering to a liberal political leaning. It represents a cultural rebellion against what Trump symbolized. The state's population is relatively young, educated, and highly engaged politically, and they made it clear they do not support leaders who undermine the issues they prioritize, such as environmental protection, social equity, and access to health care. Continuing our journey down the West Coast, we reach number 4, Washington. What unfolds when a state, a powerhouse in technology, a leader in environmental activism, and known for its progressive policies, decides it has fundamentally had enough of a particular political leader? Washington State has made its position abundantly clear. It does not align with Donald Trump's policies or his style of leadership. You'd be genuinely shocked to learn just how comprehensively the state pushed back during his presidency. From the tech hubs of Seattle and Bellevue, to the agricultural lands east of the Cascades and the coastal communities, Washington rejected nearly everything Trump stood for. In the 2020 election, the state delivered a resounding victory for Joe Biden, giving him nearly 58% of the vote, a margin of almost 20 points over Trump. This outcome was a clear message that Trump's divisive rhetoric and policies were unwelcome in the evergreen state. Washington is home to some of the world's largest and most influential corporations, particularly in the tech sector, like Microsoft and Amazon. Guess what? Trump's rhetoric concerning immigration, particularly the H-1B visa program crucial for tech talent, and the broader tech industry itself, sparked deep divisions and opposition from these corporate giants and their vast workforces. When Trump took a hard stance on these issues, companies headquartered in Washington didn't remain silent. They pushed back, advocating for policies that supported their need for global talent and open markets. This is a state where innovation is revered, and Trump's policies on technology and business often didn't sit well with the people driving that innovation forward. Furthermore, Washington has long been a leader in renewable energy and environmental protection. Trump's rollback of environmental regulations and his dismissal of climate change science hit a particularly sensitive nerve in a state that prides itself on its green economy and natural landscapes. His disregard for environmental protection was met with widespread outrage and political action. But here's a surprising element. Washington is also home to significant military installations and a large population of military families and veterans. While Hawaii's military connection was mentioned earlier, Washington's is equally profound. And while the state generally supports national defense, Trump's erratic foreign policy decisions and his sometimes disparaging remarks about military leaders and alliances left many within this community feeling uneasy and alienated. His unpredictable stance on global partnerships and military interventions created uncertainty among those whose lives are directly impacted by such decisions. The state's political activism runs deep, and from climate change marches in Seattle to protests over immigrant rights across the state, Washington's residents were consistently on the front lines resisting his leadership. The state's rejection of Trump wasn't just about policy disagreements. It felt profoundly personal for many. People felt disrespected by his approach to issues like social justice, racial equality, and basic democratic norms. With widespread protests and a growing divide over his response to civil rights movements, it was evident that Washingtonians were not just passively disagreeing, They were actively opposing his presidency and its impact. Now, as we approach the top of our list, you might be wondering which states exhibit the most profound rejection of Donald Trump. Let's move across the country to number 3, Hawaii. What does it signify when a state, defined by its deep connection to multiculturalism, its unique history, and its profound respect for environmental stewardship, repudiates Trump? Hawaii stands out as a state perhaps most culturally distinct from the former president's platform and ideals. You would be truly shocked by the sheer magnitude of Hawaii's opposition to Trump's policies throughout his time in office. The Aloha State, with its stunning natural beauty and diverse population, has long been a Democratic stronghold, and it's no surprise that it turned its back decisively on Trump's rhetoric and actions. In the 2020 election, Hawaii gave Joe Biden one of his largest victories nationwide, with Biden securing nearly 64% of the vote compared to Trump's 34%. But here's the intriguing part. Hawaii's rejection of Trump began well before the 2020 election and is deeply rooted in its cultural identity. The Aloha spirit, emphasizing love, respect, and community, stands in stark contrast to Trump's often divisive and confrontational approach. His policies and rhetoric on immigration, race, and environmental protection clashed fundamentally with the values held dear by many Hawaiians. The state, heavily reliant on tourism, agriculture, and its diverse population, saw Trump's policies as a direct threat. His administration's trade wars, visa restrictions, and alienation of international markets sent shockwaves through the tourism industry, a cornerstone of Hawaii's economy. Guess what? It wasn't just the economic policies that caused friction. Hawaii, with its fragile and unique ecosystems, has spent decades grappling with the effects of climate change, such as rising sea levels and coastal erosion. Trump's rollback of environmental protections and his withdrawal from international climate agreements were seen as deeply irresponsible and harmful. Residents witnessed his disregard for climate science as a direct threat to their islands and their future. Hawaii was already confronting significant environmental stress, and Trump's policies were perceived as only exacerbating these challenges. Moreover, Hawaii is a state with a significant military presence, playing a strategic role in the Pacific. While the state generally supports defense initiatives, Trump's unpredictable foreign policy and his sometimes strained relationships with key allies in the region caused considerable unease among military families and strategists based there. His approach to global alliances and military interventions was met with uncertainty within the state's influential military community. But perhaps the most striking aspect of Hawaii's rejection is rooted in the Aloha spirit itself. Hawaii is a place that prioritizes inclusivity, harmony, and respect for diverse cultures. Trump's divisive rhetoric on race and immigration, and his administration's policies often seen as targeting minority groups, simply did not align with the state's fundamental ethos. The people of Hawaii rejected a leader they felt failed to unite the country, choosing instead to uphold the values of compassion, understanding, and community that define their islands. Entering the top 2 most Trump-opposed states, we find ourselves in number 2, Maryland. What happens when a state with a rich tapestry of history, significant political activism, and close proximity to the nation's capital decides it vehemently rejects Trump's policies and leadership? Maryland made its stance crystal clear throughout his presidency. You'd be astounded by the level of opposition. From the vibrant streets of Baltimore to the affluent suburbs surrounding Washington, D.C., Maryland's residents overwhelmingly repudiated Trump's agenda. In the 2020 election, the state voted decisively for Joe Biden, giving him a staggering 65% of the vote, a margin of over 30 points against Trump. This wasn't just a preference, it was a landslide rejection. Guess what? Maryland's opposition wasn't solely about partisan politics. It reflected deep-seated values. The state is home to a large and influential government workforce, given its proximity to the federal government. Trump's frequent attacks on federal employees, bureaucratic institutions, and established norms did not sit well with a population where many rely on or work within these systems. His rhetoric was often perceived as disrespectful and destabilizing. Furthermore, Maryland is a diverse state with significant minority populations, particularly in and around Baltimore and the D.C. metro area. Trump's policies and rhetoric on issues like immigration, racial justice, and social equity were met with strong opposition. From healthcare access to environmental protection and climate change initiatives, Marylanders consistently found themselves at odds with Trump's administration. Residents were genuinely furious over his approach to these critical areas. You would be shocked to learn how quickly and comprehensively the state rallied against him. Maryland stands as one of the most reliably anti-Trump states on the entire East Coast. Its strong Democratic base, combined with a highly educated population and a culture of political engagement, created fertile ground for resistance. The state's elected officials were often vocal critics of Trump's policies, challenging his administration on multiple fronts, including environmental regulations and healthcare reform. The rejection was widespread, cutting across various demographic groups within the state. Marylanders didn't just vote against Trump. They actively participated in protests, engaged in political discourse, and made their voices heard in opposition to his leadership. Finally, we arrive at the #1 state on our list, a place known for its highly educated populace, strong sense of community, and deep commitment to social responsibility: Connecticut. What do you get when you combine these elements with a fundamental rejection of Donald Trump's political style and substance? Connecticut exemplifies a state that firmly stood against his presidency. With its strong Democratic base and history of moderate republicanism that often clashed with Trump's brand, the state was swift and decisive in opposing his divisive tactics and policies. You'd be genuinely amazed by the extent of this opposition. In the 2020 election, Connecticut delivered a significant victory for Joe Biden, giving him nearly 60% of the vote, a lead of approximately 20 points over Trump. Guess what? Connecticut's resistance to Trump wasn't just about party affiliation. The state's focus on education, healthcare, and environmental protection meant that Trump's policies were often a tough sell. His administration's attacks on science, healthcare access, particularly the Affordable Care Act, and environmental regulations were met with significant disapproval. You would be shocked at how the state's residents reacted to these perceived assaults on their priorities. Connecticut's strong sense of community and emphasis on social responsibility led to widespread rejection of Trump's leadership style. His divisive rhetoric and perceived lack of empathy didn't resonate in a state that values collaboration and civic engagement. From the affluent suburbs to the historic cities, Connecticut residents consistently showed their disapproval. The state's congressional delegation and state-level politicians were frequently critical of Trump, reflecting the broader sentiment of their constituents. This opposition wasn't passive. It was active and deeply felt across the state. So there you have it. 10 states where the opposition to Donald Trump was particularly pronounced, manifesting in voting patterns, protests, political action, and deep cultural clashes. From the West Coast's progressive strongholds like California, Oregon, and Washington, to the East Coast's liberal bastions like New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, Maryland, and Connecticut, and even including diverse Midwestern states like Illinois and the unique cultural landscape of Hawaii, the reasons for rejection were varied but often overlapped. Concerns about divisive rhetoric, controversial policies on immigration, healthcare, and the environment, attacks on democratic norms and institutions, and a perceived lack of empathy fueled intense opposition. These states didn't just vote blue. They actively resisted, pushed back, and made it clear that Trump's vision for America did not align with their own. This exploration reveals the profound divisions that characterized the Trump presidency and continue to shape the American political landscape today. Understanding these dynamics is crucial as the nation navigates its political future. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. If you found this analysis insightful, please remember to subscribe to our channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share it to help us reach a wider audience. Your engagement allows us to continue producing content that explores the critical issues shaping our world. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.